Okay, we are on now with Cathy LaGrow, and this is her book, The Waiting. And I was privileged to get to co-author with Cathy, and I am just so excited to have her here and to talk about how a story that she didn't know was in her family ended up becoming a book that was on the Today Show, and it just changed their whole family life forever and brought an entirely new family into them. So I'm just going to let Cathy start talking about how this book began.
Hi. Well, back in 2006, my grandmother, who was at that time 94 years old, she had a secret that I'd known my grandma all my life and grew up with her, and we were very close, but nobody in the family knew this secret, and that was that back in 1929, when she was 17 years old, she'd given birth to a baby girl that was the product of a rape, and fell in love with the little baby girl, but had to give her up for adoption, and never forgot about her baby, always prayed for her, especially on her birthday every year. And so on May 22nd in 2006, which was her daughter's 77th birthday, Grandma was praying for her, and she added this special prayer, and she said, God, I'd like to see her again before I die. She hadn't seen her in 77 years. And, you know, nobody else in her life knew anything that this daughter even existed. And unbeknownst to her, that very day, her daughter, who was now living in Wisconsin and had 6 children of her own, received in the mail a judge's signed order for release of her confidential adoption records. And about 5 or 6 weeks later, Grandma got a call from her daughter, and they were reunited a few weeks later. And then everybody in my family learned about this story. And like I said, the grandma's daughter has 6 children. One of them is a U.S. astronaut who's been in space 4 times. So it was just all this wonderful story. And then on Grandma's 100th birthday, the Associated Press wrote a story about it, and it was picked up and kind of went viral. And that was when we decided maybe this would make a good book. So that's when I started working on it.
So Cathy, I know you're just an avid reader. When did it transition to writing? Were you writing before you decided to try to write your grandmother's story, or was your grandmother's story the reason you went into writing?
Yeah, it wasn't the reason. I started reading when I was 5, and that's always been my biggest passion, my biggest love. I always, I'm an introvert, and when I was a kid, I just always had my nose stuck in a book. And then as I became an adult, I read constantly as well, and didn't do much writing. I mean, I would write, bad poems sometimes or different things, but I had my first baby in 2006. So it was right before I found out about this secret of Grandma's. I had my first baby, and then my second in 2008. And when he was about a year or so old, I was a full-time mom, and I kind of needed something else to focus on other than, diapers and babies. And so I started writing a little blog, and that was kind of my first foray into writing. I would write about books and my life and science stuff, because I'm kind of a science geek. And I had one story published in Chicken Soup for the Soul, which is kind of a great way to get into writing, because it's short little stories. They pay, I think it's $200 or $300 for a story. Yeah. And when I started working on the book, that was all I had done, was just my blog and that one published story.
And I'm sure you're reading, because you are I think you might read more than anyone I know. At your house, it's like there's stacks everywhere of different books. But I'm sure that really helped develop your writing as well. But I'd love to hear how just the challenges of taking a family story and being close to your grandmother, knowing, her, but then discovering something new about her that you'd never known, and taking just that story, and then also your new family with just meeting Ruth and all of their family, Mark the astronaut and Brian, who's Brian? You'll have to read the book to know Brian. But how do you take all of that and try to find how to write a story? Because I'm sure it was completely overwhelming, all of just the intricacies of who people were, and that, all the way back from their histories and coming as immigrants. What were kind of the challenges that you faced, and how did you kind of work on finding your way through that?
One of the biggest challenges was that, of course, this was Grandma's story, and she passed away last summer, but she was a very strong person, and she wanted this to be very accurate. And so I had to please her. It was her story. It wasn't written in the first person, but it was her story. And so everything that was in it had to be accurate, and it had to, there were certain things about other peripheral characters that she didn't want in the book, and so I had to honor that. The biggest challenge once I started writing was presenting Grandma as a young girl, as a 16-year-old girl, because when I was born, I think she was almost 60. And so from my earliest memories of her, she was an older person already. Right. And I was trying to bring this 16-year-old girl to life. And so one thing that helped was she and I were a lot alike. And so I would take, kind of think how I would have reacted in a certain situation, or, try to put myself there. And another thing was I sat down and wrote out, I think it was 2 pages of just description of my grandma, because, people's characters don't really change, and their personalities don't change much over their life. So I wrote out 2 pages of things that described my grandma, ways that she was, and then I kind of extrapolated that back to put into a 16-year-old girl, that was younger and more naive. So that helped. One of the other challenges with this story was that it took place over 100 years, and that was a lot of stuff to fit into one book. And part of my initial struggles that I had was I was trying to kind of fit everything in. I mean, there's so much history, so much of her life, and it was all interesting. Yeah. But you couldn't have that all in the book. And I remember that was one of the ways that you helped me, was because one of the small disagreements we had when we were writing was that you wanted to spend more time on the time period that she was pregnant and in the House of Mercy and having the baby. And you were thinking of it from a story point of view. And I was thinking, but wait, we have 100 years worth of stuff to get through. We can't spend all these chapters on, her as a young girl. And you were so sweet about it, but you kind of, held firm. And so I deferred to you. And of course it was the absolutely right decision to make. I had to tell you afterwards not to get the big head because you were right and I was wrong. But that was where, in my first conversation with my agent, she said, in order to get this put together, especially in the time period, because at that point Grandma was 100 years old. Mm-hmm. She said, you're going to need a collaborator that can help you put all this together. And of course that was a good lesson. Listen to your agent, because she knows what she's talking about. And it was absolutely the right call, because there's no way I could have done it, especially in that time frame, without, you with your experience guiding me through that, and being there in times like that where I needed to know, yes, we do, for the story's sake, we do need to spend several chapters here. So. Right.
Well, and you also spent a lot of time going and sitting with your grandmother and audio taping her stories, and right. Having that. And then we also had the 200 pages of the adoption documents that had all of your grandmother's letters to the House of Mercy, and right. The director writing her back for almost 20 years. But I think really having you have those audio tapes probably, just offered so much value to the story, and getting her personality down in a way that was different. I'm sure you discovered a lot of things about her through that. Maybe would you mind sharing a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Personally, that was probably the biggest treasure for me out of this whole thing. I mean, obviously, doing the book, getting her story out there, in time for her to be able to see it, because she got to see the book and read it before she passed away last year. But the biggest treasure for me personally was getting to know my grandma as something other than my grandma and this old woman. I mean, I got to, in the process of writing the story, I got to see her as a little girl, and growing up in South Dakota on the prairie, and then as a young woman and a young mother, and going through World War II and all of these things. And I mean, it's kind of embarrassing. It was probably typical, but I had never stopped to think about her as a young person and to think about what her life was like. And so, sitting with her and talking about her life and asking her questions for hours and hours, I did get to know her, and that was just a precious, precious thing.
Right. I'm sorry. I have a little guy who just showed up. Go up to Daddy. Go take that to Daddy. I thought we were fine.
Well, if you see something moving behind me, it's my two cats. And my boys are gone right now, but my cats are wandering around.
I'm sure that moment, though, when you were able to give this book, which I wanted to say too, this book is just, helping on this book really shaped my life in a huge way. And I often will think of Minka and kind of in a way of, buck up, get that Minka spirit, because she went through so many challenges in her life, and she just had this joy and faith that was just very inspiring. But I wanted to say that on the cover too, the picture, these are Minka's hands. And this is the photograph of her and her little daughter that she has saved since 1928. And so I really loved that. Just maybe tell us too about how, I know, I mean, as your grandmother, she has such a greater impact for you, but just maybe share about being able to hand that book to her and share that with her, being on the Today Show with her. I'm sure that just remains with you in such a profound way.
Right. Well, she had to, proofread the manuscript and make sure everything was up to par. And so she did that. She read the first 14 chapters that fall before it was published. And then, but what was so special to me was getting to present her with a book, because it really is so pretty, and it's got that insert of the full color photographs, and which is so beautiful. Yeah. And then for me, it was very special for her to be able to read all about Ruth's childhood, because there's all those chapters that cover Ruth's childhood, and I'm sure many of those details were things that Grandma didn't know, because they, at that point they'd known each other for 8 years, but had only been able to visit a couple times a year, and so I'm sure there was a lot of details in there that were things that she had longed to know about her daughter for so many decades. And now she got to read about her daughter's life, which was, in some ways idyllic, especially compared to Grandma's childhood, which is exactly what she had wanted for her daughter, and why she had given her up, was that so that she could have this beautiful life that she has had. But yeah, I gave the book, I flew down and gave it to her when we taped the Today Show interview last spring. And that was really special. Grandma was, that was the first time that I knew something was wrong with her. She had a very quick illness with what we think was throat cancer. But she certainly rallied for the Today Show interview and was just her usual, spunky self. So, and I think she got a kick out of that, because she's seen so much history, so many presidents, come and go. And she'd always refer to herself as uneducated because she'd had to drop out of school in the 8th grade. So for me, it was really special that she was interviewed by, a daughter and granddaughter of U.S. presidents, because it was Jenna Bush Hager that interviewed us. So
just go share with him. Okay, go with Daddy. Yeah.
Chocolate cake for everyone.
Writing and doing this with children.
I don't know how you do it.
Well, and I want to show that, I'm glad you mentioned that. The insert is fantastic with all of, the pictures. This is just a gorgeous book. I'm just so thrilled with it and proud to have gotten to be a part of it. I love this story. So, but tell us briefly, I don't want to keep you here too long, but tell us just what advice would you give writers, writers in general, and then also for them trying to write a family history?
Writers in general, I would say kind of the thing that I've read a lot of writing books, and they all kind of say the same thing, which is read and write. That's the two, the two things. And I think a lot of writers maybe get the second part of that, where they write a lot, but maybe don't read as much. Mm-hmm. And I think it's absolutely vitally important to read a lot. And I've read some advice that says to read in the genre you want to write in. Okay. And, maybe it works differently for different people. I tend to disagree with that a little bit, because I think that if you only do that, you start to become derivative. Mm-hmm. And so I read a huge variety of, I read memoirs and history books and, physics books. And my two favorite magazines as far as writing is Vanity Fair and The New Yorker, because they just have the best writers in the business. Mm-hmm. But and that's, more kind of investigative journalism. But I think if you read just all those different genres, you pull different pieces from, tips and things that they do and the way they approach things. You can, pull all these different pieces. And I think that helps you have a unique voice and, find your own path, and where you're not just sounding like one particular, your favorite author or something. Right. And as far as writing a family story, I think obviously the sitting down and interviewing them, and of course that gives you the added bonus of getting to know that family member so much better. Right. You will have to do a lot of research on history, especially, my grandma's case was 100 years. I had to go back, and we wanted to be accurate. So you and I both went back and just, researched the plants and the weather on all these days. And of course that was fun, but that took a lot of time. And then being respectful, especially if you're writing somebody else's story. I wanted to honor my grandmother, and I didn't want anything in there that she didn't want in there. And so being respectful of that is their story. It's precious to them. And keeping that in mind, when you're writing for them.
Oh, that's fantastic. I think that's excellent advice. I love the reading widely and just really considering to honor people through writing a family story. This has been wonderful. I would love if you would tell us where people can find you, and I highly recommend the book. There will be, there's probably, well, it's now out in paperback, and you just wrap us up, Cathy. Tell us where the websites and where to find it.
All right. My website is CathyLaGrow.com. So CathyLaGrow.com. And then my Facebook page, which is just Cathy LaGrow. My Facebook author page has a lot of, I go on there almost every week and put new kind of throwback Thursday pictures, but there's a lot of pictures that did not make it into the book. Different information and news also, because the book so far has been published or is being published in 3 foreign languages, and there's some other exciting news coming down the pike. So I always announce everything there first, so that's a good resource as well.
Yes, excited about all the surprises ahead too. So thank you so much for being a part of today and with Storymakers, and I love you, and just can't wait to have more writing adventures.
Yes. All right.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.